The deepening democracy study started before the 2023 election, when we tried to analyze and discuss what we think were the major constraints to free, fair election. To run up to that election, we issued a report on, after election, democracy, elections without democracy. And after that, we have then come back here again last 2 weeks to look at what we are learning from the elections, off-season elections. And our focus has been that INEC, there's need for radical restructuring of INEC. We discussed that issue last 2 weeks, and we had various participants discuss on the need for a national action plan on reform of INEC, which will culminate in some kind of ways report, becoming, disbanding and constituting INEC according to the major recommendations of ways to secure its independence and true neutrality. Now, again, we have been working on the report of that conversation, but we are heading towards Ondo election with the lessons of Edo before us. And we felt it's necessary to really look at Edo again and tell ourselves whether we see something different. INEC last week, I think early this week, said they are going to punish officials who are involved in electoral practices in Edo. I don't know whether INEC views are really that respectable, or whether their views, whether INEC is that credible. But the point is, whatever happened in Edo, INEC did the same promise after 2023 presidential election. INEC said, we've seen the error, we're going to be better. Edo has happened. INEC is also promising to be better. So this dialogue is to look at what happened in Edo and what should be done, and what should be done to secure INEC's confidence in INEC. There are 3 points we want to raise, and that's what we brought people who have the knowledge and experience. First is that the confidence in INEC, not just the commissioners, but also the staff, is at the lowest level. And so, in spite of the protests by some of the parties in Edo as to the partisan nature of the parties involved, there is the INEC has consistently maintained those conflicted officials. That's number one. Number two is that we are seeing increasing weaponization of the INEC platform. 2 new nominations for National Commissioner and REC has been made. And these are persons who, for example, the National Commissioner, one of the REC has been someone who has been Administrative Secretary in Lagos State, INEC. The story we are getting is that maybe the new government now wants to use NEC officials, directors in NEC, for the new positions. And these are civil servants who are used to obeying, authority, so obey the command. That's 1. 2, these are persons who have been part of electoral manipulation for a long period of time. And so it raises question as to, if we don't reconstitute INEC, what kind of INEC are we going to have when most of the officials of INEC, the new commissioners and recs, will be directors and management staff in INEC? So that raises a new challenge, and the political parties are not responding to it. These 2 names are already pending. Some of the persons rumored is somebody who has been REC in Lagos, who has been in Edo during the time of Adam Oshomole, is now being touted as the new national chairman that we appointed of INEC. So the issue around INEC's independence is becoming more worrisome, and that's part of the issue we feel we should consider. 2 is that more reports are coming out from Edo that shows clearly that the reports in IREF are now being, the certified true copies are no longer reflecting the results cited immediately after the election. So we are seeing now that whereas the IREF was, as at the day of election, as at the day election closed, it was very clear there was much discrepancy in IREF. For example, if you look at the declared result by INEC in Edo State, the winner, APC, scored about 291,667 votes, whereas PDP scored 247,264 votes. But the IRF showed, after all the results have been entered, including the 3 that were uploaded days after, showed that it was 266,233 votes for APC and 258,162 for PDP. Now, if you look at that reconciliation, the margin of the difference in IRF was about 8,000 votes, where the difference in, as declared by INEC, was 44,000 votes. Now, if you look again, some of the votes that ought to be cancelled, those who are overvoting and those not certified by proper accreditation, that margin totally wiped off, at least without any further allegation. It should require some kind of rerun for those areas. Okay. So the point is this, that even today, those who have applied for CTC, what they're being certified to is different from what is already in the IRF. Now the question for us is, how should the court, 2 points now, election has been declared, winner, loser has emerged. How should the courts respond to these alleged absurdities and abnormalities? That's very important. Now, if you look at the past, not much hope we have. But some of us are of the view that, considering the terrain we are entering and the fact that we are seeing increasing loss of confidence in the electoral system, we are seeing also the fact that INEC is getting worse, almost more criminal in their undertaking. How should the courts now respond? Because there are 3 levels. The first level is the level of INEC management of elections. The second level is the level of judicial management of dispute. And so 3 issues that we have looked at. We have looked at all the cases that has gone ahead, and we see 3 problems. First is the issue around front-loading of petition, which requires that within 21 days, anybody who wants to file a case should file the case, and you must upload the witnesses you want to use for the evidence. Now, what has happened is that INEC, of course, expectedly, some of the officials whose testimony will be necessary are not willing to upload statements before them. So we've seen that in the Kogit's case and several other cases. That's number 1 challenge. The second challenge is, how should the courts view clear evidence of manipulation on the record? So if, for example, the IRF at a particular time showed a particular result, and now later the CTC certified true copy of the result is different from what was uploaded as at the time election was completed, and even different from what was declared as result, how should the court look at all this evidence? So this is important for us, because we are now entering a period where there's greater desperation, and the country is divided, confused. Poverty, the issues around the economic crisis, the conflicts, terror, violence. The Abuja School believes that deepening democracy will require 3 major steps. First is disbanding INEC, we've said that before, and creating a new INEC. It has a lot of risk, a lot of uncertainty. We can discuss that. 2 is that we must take away the incentive for politicians to try to rig elections, because they know that they can get the full benefit of that enterprise, because courts, the judiciary, will not go far to reverse it. And thirdly, we say that you must have a system of electoral management that is clear, transparent, where results can be determined and the clarity of those results are established, so that everybody knows who has won. So not the one that you go back and wait for INEC to finally give you the result, and then when the INEC issues it, the certified true copy is different from what you saw on election day. So these are the 3 issues we are raising, and these are important for us because of the fact that we are now run down to constitute the new INEC. And from the appointments that we have seen so far, it looks like the new strategy is going to be more dangerous. The previous strategy is to appoint partisan politicians. The new strategy is to appoint faceless INEC staffers whose loyalty has been guaranteed over time, who have no incentive to be independent because they've been part of managing corrupt INEC. So we want to bring it on board to discuss that. So far, we heard this as a story, but we have seen 2 new appointments that reflect this pattern. And the idea here is that the next INEC commissioners and chairman would be either former directors of INEC or serving INEC management staff who has been trusted along the line in delivering these long cases of manipulated election. And so I would think at this point there's need for the leading politicians to come on board on a real conversation. We are working to an Ondo one-to-one. INEC has promised heaven and delivered hell in the past. They are saying they have learned their mistakes. Ondo will be better. But these are not mistakes. These are deliberate, effort to falsify things. You can't have a different result on your IRF and then you declare a different result on your, and then after that you have a different result issued at CTC. Those are not mistakes. If it was logistic, that's mistake. Those appear as strategic, deliberate, institutional manipulation. And so what are the strategy for INEC to correct these errors in Ondo as they are promising? Yesterday, I think the Peace Committee has gone to go to the rituals of peace again. I think either they did it today or I think it's today they're doing it, but they traveled yesterday. Bishop Kuka called me when he was going. Now, after all this routine, we'll come back and have another press conference on Ondo because the very structure of this manipulation is still there. So this is really why Abuja School thinks that we'll continue this conversation to create a national action plan. And let me say it clear. If you don't do justice in a Edo case that's glaring, there's no guarantee that there will be justice in Ondo or justice in 2024. I'm happy that some of the people who observed these elections are here. There's no doubt about the data is clear. There was high-level manipulation of those results. Let's not forget the vote buying or the printing of result sheets. Even the results declared are different from the ones available now. The ones on the IRF were different from the ones declared. Many of the places where there are double, double vote, overvoting, that ought to have been cancelled, have now been rectified in the CTC of the results. That's not the way to run it. So that's the essence of our continuous conversation we started last 2 weeks. We focus mostly on how to change INEC. I now want to bring in the dimension that INEC is now being reconstituted again, step by step with these new appointments. While we're talking about disbanding and reconstituting, they have started appointing, and the new strategy is to appoint staffers, former directors, people who have low profile. So you can't even say they are partisan, but people who have been programmed to continue the existing process. And that, I think, is a danger. I think that's my intro for this conversation. So what we want to do is that we want to look at the various dimensions of this crisis. The ultimate idea is what can we do practically to change the direction and the narratives of this of electoral reform in Nigeria. And last point is that I'm afraid with what's going on in the country today and our neighbors in West Africa, it seems that we don't have much luxury to wave away concerns for 2023 election, 2027 election. And again, we saw what happened in 2007. As soon as the election tribunal, Supreme Court finished the issue, mechanism was put in place mainly for electoral reform. But this time around, somehow there is a silence among all the little political parties around electoral reform. Is it a good or bad omen? That's really the problem. Is it that we trust that the institution will work itself out clear, or is it that the politicians no longer care about electoral reform? That's the point. How are you? Welcome. Austin, I know you're...
Is one in the behaviors of the umpire and also in the behaviors of the political parties. I'm very reticent about calling for the disbandment of INEC. For this reason, there's an absence of conversation around discursive power, in our country, and the effect of power on how the state is run. I've come to the reversible conclusion that there is an autocracy against the nation state, either within the political class or classes outside the political class. And I explained, I think a few years ago, Sam, you and I discussed extensively Michel Foucault's conception of disciplinary power, the ability of power to not only transform itself, but transform the nature and character of the state itself, deepen the state, entrench the state in a way that it distributes economic resources across board. What we have today in our country are attempts by the elite classes and even classes outside the elite classes to supplant power, to make power what it is not. And we draw an example from what happened in Abuja a few days ago, I think last week, where my good friend from Edo State, boastfully asked an Uber driver, "Do you know who I am?" And he speaks to the fact that what we tend to do is will and act and conduct ourselves in a manner that we use power to repress others. And because the power and political environment has been configured in a manner that makes power repressive, and cohesive, I ask myself, if you disband INEC, where are you going to get the new appointees from? Is it from planet Mars? There is a fundamental problem about the way we conceive power, in our country. Once we begin to put the discussion on the table around power, we begin to fashion solution. Look at everywhere. MBA election this year, it was all about supplanting the wills, of lawyers. The election was not free and fair. Whoever emerged as president of MBA cannot beat his chest that I won that election fair, free, transparently. So if we move outside the political terrain and we go into the field of associations, we begin to ask ourselves, how do we conceive power in such a way that power becomes emancipatory? How do we conceive power in such a way that the man who exercises and wields power wields it in the public, in the public interest? President Tinubu, for what I know, did not win the 2023 elections. And if you move further to 2019, Buhari did not win the 2019 elections. I will quote somebody here, Professor Yakub Mahmood. Until 2019 was my very good friend. We used to speak every day. Until that incident in Osun State, where PDP won 3 local governments. And the man called me and told me PDP had won. I'm under pressure by the power that be in our country to flip the result the other way. What you can do, because you have big voice in social media, scream. And I screamed. The following morning, INEC declared those results won by PDP as incomplete. Inconclusive, that was the word. And declared, a rerun. And when the rerun came, the 3 local governments were heavily militarized. Yes. PDP that was in the lead was shot out of the 3 local governments, and the APC just thumbprinted. Yes. Look, I don't know where we can go from here.
But if I interrogate you, because this is the issue, you are right. We are trying to create, that's a power problem, but you can structurally mitigate that power problem. If, for example, your friends' continuation does not depend on reappointed by or whatever, probably he would have listened to you and stick out his neck to do the right thing. So what I say is that somebody who's appointed in a particular way has more resilience and immunity, so to say. It doesn't guarantee, because our social factors, cultural factors can make people voluntarily enter into captivity. Because there are people who have tenure, judges, for example, who may not be removed, but they will voluntarily chop money. But it's possible that if somebody is appointment is based on a different metric, that people who emerge will be less in bed with political actors, and more possibly help us in this conception of power. So it's not a zero. So it's not like, okay, once we bring these guys who are independently appointed, they will suddenly become moral champions. But it's like maybe the structural changes may help them withstand this kind of pressure.
Yes, in a way, I agree with you. Go back to the fundamental basis of how power is conceived and how power is deployed. Who conceives power? Who deploys this power? The president, who has the constitutional power to appoint the INEC chairman, for example, conceives power in such a narrow way. His conception of power is not emancipatory. So if he's appointing an individual in the context of in the context of the proposition you are making, is that individual who can pursue his narrow interest that he will present,
So we said,
he will appoint. You know, a few years ago, 10, 15 years ago, when the debate, I was abroad, when the debate about the appointment of INEC chairman was in the public space, some of us thought, and I had that strong view, that the power to appoint should be removed from the president and taken to the national parliament. But I do not think I hold that position again, because our national parliament is even more, is worse than the president. But you see, we cannot create a nation on the basis of illusion. We have to work with the reality we have found ourselves. That's why the media, institutions like Abuja School of Politics, are important. We need to put public pressure on the president to adopt those metrics, that will further the cause of democracy. Democracy for the state, not democracy against the state or autocracy against the state.
Okay, so it makes sense. So, Austin,
some of us went against it then, and we said let it be NJC based on waste report. But today you also agree that waste NJC is on. So at what point, who should be the appointing power? I've come to the final conclusion, maybe it's not yet final, that we must put strategy in place, not to look at the people running the affairs of election, but to look at the process that turn up results for the elections. What am I saying? It doesn't matter who is INEC chair. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who is the rec of INEC. It doesn't matter. What matters is that the people become the owner of the electoral process. Just as the election came out from the United States, even before it was officially announced, for your information, it has not been officially announced. The US election is not officially announced, but we already, because until Congress meet and there's a presentation of the Electoral College and there's an approval, it's a process. It's a process. But the people conducted the election. And how will the people conduct the election? By putting systems in place that when election holds in polling unit 1, the results of polling unit 1, it's not just by way of paper alone. People have criticized electronic transmission of results because of, it's okay to criticize electronic result because electronic transmission of results because of the possibility of hacking. But I have an alternative. There is no way, as already alluded by the convener, that if you have an INEC chairman, even though you sack all of these national commissioners, you sack them today, and you appoint us in this room, there will be error. That is when you start saying, Dr. Sam Amadi, he has changed. He has not changed. There are forces. How will someone like a Taisolari eventually fail in the faith bank, in the People's Bank? There are systemic challenge that needs to be addressed, and you need systemic solution, not the people. I've taken my position away from the people to systems, and you can call it system theory. And what am I talking about? As we head to future election, not Ondo will not solve what I'm going to propose, because the system is still the system now. As what presents to us an opportunity is the electoral reform. We need a huge organizing, the convener leading all of us, taking it that we need to reform the election result process. And how do I mean? We already have electronic means in our Electoral Act. Unlike in the 2015, where there was no smart card written in the Electoral Act. Now we have technology embedded in our Act, which means there's a legal form. So we have a beavers. And the beavers' work is to snap the result sheet of the Form C8A at the polling unit level and then upload that for the people to see. We thought we have gotten to a level where we can rest, but it's not yet, aluta continua. It's not yet to roll. But what am I saying in essence? We need a system that has an electronic voting and transmission of results. But there's a caveat. If you go to collect money at a POS machine, you get a receipt, true or false? You get a printout. That printout becomes your ballot paper. You have that ballot paper stick into the ballot box. After the election is over, the polling is over, we tally both the electronic and the paper, the ballots. When it agrees, you send the one electronically. You can send it to a portal that shows to everybody in the world. You don't need human error. I tell you, the greatest challenge in our electoral system is the collation process. It is an opaque system that we cannot resolve in this room or this year. Why I say it is this. When polling happens at the polling unit, that result can be changed at the collation point. Those who voted are no longer there. And you ask me how? If there's an error, just one error, that result from the polling unit can be classified null and void. It is in a legal regime. It's allowed. It's legal. So where there are differentials in the number of ballot paper issued and ballot paper used, where there are differentials, the returning officer at the ward collation level can declare that result invalid and push it aside. Whereas there's a party already winning, who are thought they had won. That result is no longer added. There's another side of it. Today, INEC has actually dropped some, I don't want to speak about some legal issues around the CTC done by our friend, but it's also that there are evidence that suggests that INEC had downloaded or removed certain results on the IRF, make some correction and uploaded it. It is not the first time. It happened in Edo 2020.
It happened in Edo 2024.
It happened in Edo 2024. So you just go, because there is no system in place or no policy in place to check what can be removed and re-uploaded. If we don't put those in place, we are going nowhere. But I'm not even asking for that processes now. Let's forget about that process. Get the results and the polling unit, hard copy, collect, normal collation, APC, PDP, ABGA, Labour, do all the collation, go on the electronic one and do your tabulation. It electronically tabulates. And when that is done, you press the send in the presence of everybody, recognizing that the result sheet from EC8A agrees with what is to be sent, and you snap and you have a valid result. So the one, no error of manipulation, no error of tabulation. It will reduce the cost that we spend on elections. Let me quickly give you a metaphor before I move on. In 2019 election, of course, 2023 election, you can do the math. Particularly 2019 election, there were over 80 million registered voters. And INEC will usually print over 80 million, let's say 100 million. And those ballot papers are currency level ballot papers with some features, security features because of theft or manipulation and all of that. If you look at the results of the 2019 election, the total number of people who voted, cancelled, rejected, were less than 30 million. In all essence, we burnt about 70 million ballot papers. Imagine that one ballot paper costs 10 naira. Do the maths. We literally burnt 10 naira times 70 million sheets. Whereas this country is suffering educationally, health-wise, and all sectors. And yet we spend huge amount of money on an election that is disputed. We've got to reduce the cost of election. We've got to make the process in a way that is seamless. We've got to have a dashboard that tells us who is winning. We don't have to rely on one individual called returning officer or scope at the state level who determine the cost of all our voting. At the end of the day, sir, we would have reduced judicial impunity, in which case, like Jonathan said, that the people no longer vote. The judiciaries are not the one voting. We have seen that again and again. We must find a way. I've already proposed. I know my proposal will have some defects, but strengthening it will matter for us as we begin to go ahead. I so rest my case. Thank you very much.
December at the Court of Appeal, the Donga Usa Takum Federal Constituency in Taraba, where Rima Shawulu of the PDP lost. He was winning the elections until INEC decided to cancel certain polling units. And when he did, I advised them that, look, as your lawyer, rather than take part in another process, let us go to court on the basis of pre-election and challenge the powers of INEC. But politicians, for what they are, very optimistic. Let them rerun it 20 times and we'll win 20 times. We went in 20 times, we went in the subsequent election and it was beaten. You know, we went to the tribunal in Taraba, we lost. We appealed. The appeal was heard here in Abuja because they consolidated all appeals in Abuja. And when we raised a fundamental issue about our right in participating in subsequent election, not extinguished by the outcome of the elections. This is the strange thing about the judiciary. The way corruption has eaten into election petition adjudication and the way the judiciary judicializes the election process itself. The leading justice, there were three, told us that, look, we are not interested in oral argument, adopt your brief of argument on some of the essential issues. And we itemized for us the essential issue. I insisted that I would want to address the court on that issue because it was new to our electoral jurisprudence. The justice told us, oh, don't worry, we'll address it in our judgment. When they delivered the judgment, I was in England. They told me 24 hours. Luckily for me, I had my wig and gown there. Same way I have wig and gown, I quickly wore and appeared on Zoom. We lost on the basis of a point that the court told us not to address it. They should address. Was used.
So what is it?
Look, money change hands.
Of course. So, but the point is, first we ask ourselves, why should collection of results really happen the way it's happening? Results are completed at the polling units.
Yeah.
That's the voting. You sign off. Why you have agents? Agents are there. They sign the result and upload. If I was a judicial officer and you bring me a result from the polling unit and you bring me a result collated, I would discount the collected results. Because the essence of electoral jurisprudence is to enable the voters vote. So why is it that Nigerian judges now empower bureaucrats? So what we are doing now is that transferring power from citizens to bureaucrats in INEC, the so-called staff, INEC staff and officials, to now decide result. So see what happened in Edo, for example. Once the data has been uploaded, then they start collation and they start fighting. That's the reason why the governor could storm into the place. That's the reason why they could drag the governor out. Why would anybody storm into the place if the results that are released real time on the IRF and the world can access it? Look at it. We talk about US election. Oh, they conceded. Why would you concede? As the votes are arriving, The ballots are being declared. The leaks are being noted. People are seeing that, okay, as they are counting the thing, people are already knowing that this is what the person has. So there's nothing like after the whole thing has been done. Then you wait for INEC officials to take the one by one and accept. Someone will say, this is what is no good, throw it away. Someone will not use bio. I can show you now, there's some of the results I have here are mutilated. Maybe 50, they will add 2 to 50, go 250. They sign name. 10 or 0 or 5, they'll add 1 and 1 here. It becomes 150, 51. So the question is, can we accept all this? And I wish that we can come out of this. It's good to be pessimistic, this will not work, but at the same time, the consequence, because I've heard politicians say that they now know what to do. So first, we're going to see violence increase. INEC will now concentrate power to itself and then bid for the highest bidder. So, and that's what deceives people. So when the ruling party is defeated in one election, people have hope. So it's like tantalizing. They give you something to make you have hope that it's possible. Then you double your effort. So we are coming to a point where I think it's actually easy to reform this if there could be national consensus. For example, I agree with you. Even if we leave the constitutional amendment of changing INEC appointment and focus on procedure. Now, why should Electoral Act not be radical and clear enough to provide a simple way that once votes have been counted at the polling unit and signed off and uploaded, that's the result INEC will use, the courts will use. And make it clear that the courts can accept evidence from anywhere. Now, you restrict it, you not say that before you get an evidence, even subpoenaed evidence, you must have front-loaded that statement before. At the time you are filing the claim. 21 days is what you have. In that 21 days, INEC will stonewall, not give you access to any document. You get a court order. We saw in this Edo case. They were writing every day. We've got a court order. INEC will not comply. Maybe last minute, 2 days. Then you rush the application, submit. Then you build evidence, and the court says, those evidence, they are true, but you should have front-loaded the statement of that witness the first day you are filing this case. So I think that MBS met yesterday, NEC. Afraid I couldn't get a flight. I had a ticket, I have no flight. I was supposed to be there as a member of a leader of one of the sections, one of the committees. And the point is that, is it now time that the legal practitioner will not say, there are 2 stages. Yes, we don't want to judicialize the election, but at the same time, the essence of judicial review is that judges themselves must now be able to stay apart from this conspiracy and try to push through the reform by saying, at our own end, this is justice. We'll look at the real results, real time. We'll not look at results you have cooked after the voting. Because I don't see why a judge should accept a result that's different from the result that was declared at the venue 3 days after. Then you change it. Because there's no, you see, INEC does not have power to amend the results. The power given to INEC under Section 67 or so is the act to reject results that were not in line with the voting. Yes.
Okay, so that's where there's complication.
Yeah.
In fact,
thoughts, around the subject matter of deepening our democracy through strengthening the electoral system. But I think I want to align largely with the position of Austin, right? With regards to the interaction between system and individual, the system theory. It reminds me of those who are rightly anyway, based on their own conviction, their own agitation, for constitutional change. And I've made the argument that we rather need attitudinal change more before constitutional change, because you can change the constitution 100 times, and if those who are operating the constitution are still deficient in character and attitude, of course, it will take us nowhere. Now, let's come down to the level of election. The problem is large, has to do with our system, and that's why we will continue to change the system. We have been changing it. Before now, we didn't have this level of technological sophistication in our electoral system, but we now have it. Even then, we still have individuals circumventing the processes, getting involved in sharp practices, and of course this is likely to continue because our electoral process is largely transactional. The process has been commodified, against the background of our society that is steeped in moneyism, where if you have money, you can buy your way, you can buy all consciences as much as possible, depending on your war chest. But again, I'm going to differ a little bit from him, because the system does not exist in a vacuum. Human beings operate the system. And of course, we also need human beings, to stabilize and sustain this system. How can we get human beings that are conscientious, that are not ready to shirk responsibilities to strengthen the system? Of course, it will emanate either in two ways. I've made the argument several times in public places, either through happenstance or deliberate. Deliberate is when we are conscious about the people that we choose into positions of authority, into institutions for them to help us strengthen it. Because ordinarily there's a dialectical relationship between individuals and institutions. And when we have this interconnection, they strengthen each other, they rub off on each other. That's why sometimes we have very strong, determined individuals being able to change institutions. And there are so many examples that we can cite. Sometimes it may not go beyond their tenure, but at least they have done their best. They have left their own legacy. If we have very deliberate, careful, like Dr. Amadi has been arguing about people that man positions of authority, you could see them making long-lasting effect in institutions and strengthening for our sake, and not just through appointment, it will also be through the political process. If we are much more conscious about those who get into positions of authority on the basis of pedigree, although I know that politics has nothing to do with rationality, has nothing to do with reason. Sometimes politics can be very stupid. We just saw it happening in the US. But sometimes again, we get the good side that we want, where we have good people elected into positions of authority. And of course, the second area is happenstance. Sometimes you do not expect that people who are credible enough, people, will get into positions of authority and do the kind of things that you expect them to do. But they just go there and spring surprises. But this is not to be relied on. The one that we need to rely on is the one that is deliberate, where we are painstaking about those who put into positions of authority. And of course, we can have these individuals, because of their strong character, they're able to rub off properly on the institutions and help us to sustain it in the way in which the system that Austin is talking about can be sustained, and of course, when you have a system working through institutions, the factor of the human being becomes minimal, becomes reduced, and his ability to manipulate the system will be largely inconsequential, if not impossible. Then again, it's also very important for us to look at the system that I often regard as a third party that come in to help us regulate or adjudicate the process, when we have people interested in litigating it, the judiciary. There are many lawyers here, excellent ones at that. But from my own point of view, I often make the decision between judgment and justice, between moral justice and social justice, between legal justice and moral justice, and of course between truth and justice. Most of the time what we have after election is that we have justice, but we do not have the truth. We have judgment, but we do not have justice, and we see it happening, things that tend to offend our sense of reasoning. And of course, unfortunately or unfortunately, it's something that we do not want to say, but we have seen the reputation of very, respectable profession, being diminished on account of the kind of adjudication that they administer in the electoral process. So we know that they are very critical, and of course arguments have been made about their ability, about their being part of the system. We agree, we are not disputing that, but we are once again asking that they should be much more conscientious, distinguishing between just judgment and justice, between truth and justice, because when we consistently have judgment flying in the face of reality, flying in the face of truth, of course our sensibilities are offended, and of course their reputation is diminished before us. This is not what we expect of a salutary, historical, traditionally respectable profession that law is. So having said that, I think previous speakers have also said all the right things that I agree with, but again, our focus has to be on the system. Otherwise, we'll talk from now until 2027, right, when another election will hold, and of course, we'll still see ourselves repeating the same thing, and we will not be making progress. I rest my case. Thank you, moderator.
Okay, my name is Chuks Akamado. I'm a fellow of the Abuja School. We will all agree that at the base of this conversation is the desperation of the political class in this country. And if we agree that at the base of the conversation is the desperation of the political class, I want to note that the return on investment in politics in this part of the world is very, very high. And because the return on investment is very high, our politicians are not ready to get any less desperate. That simply means as the days go by, our politicians are likely to get much more desperate. Unfortunately, our people are also getting progressively poorer. That leaves them very, very vulnerable. Then for the politician who is desperate, he's going to deploy violence. He's going to deploy everything within his reach to make sure that he wins. To make sure that he wins elections. And when he deploys all of that, the system will suffer. The vulnerable Nigerian, who is the average voter, will of course accept whatever that is given to him by the politician so that he casts his votes and then walks away with whatever that is being offered. This is where we find ourselves. So I don't expect our politicians to change their attitude because we are not doing anything regarding ensuring that the return on investment in politics becomes very, very low. For as long as it's high, our politicians will continually be desperate. Then I think as we approach this curve, INEC, yes, INEC is infected, viral and bacterial, and we're not doing anything about that infection. That means we cannot expect INEC to perform any differently afterwards, unless we decide to diagnose the problem as we are doing at present and see how we can treat that, that ailment. Then that leaves us again with the judiciary. I think that where we find ourselves at the moment, as we mount pressure on the government to do something about the election management body, we should begin to think along the lines of piling pressure on the judiciary too. The judiciary is at liberty to exploit the window of the burden of proof and make sure that when electoral matters come before them, that what they have at the back of their mind would be, this is a court of justice and not a court of law. What do I mean by that? Judicial activism. If our judges decide to wear the garb of judicial activism, I believe they will be bold enough to dispense justice and not judgment. And when they do that, that should serve as sufficient deterrence to our political class, who are eternally desperate and whose appetite for election fraud can never be curtailed unless they are compelled to do so. Thank you.
So thank you very much. My name is Hawam, to join others in appreciating Dr. Amadi and his the initiative of the Abuja School of Social and Political Thought. I think these regular conversations, particularly at this time, are very relevant to keep us on our toes, not to let go. Somebody said he has lost hope. We should not lose hope, and what can keep that hope alive is regular conversations like this, because we own this country, they don't, and we cannot give up and let it go like that. So, based on the conversations, I'm just thinking through, We've heard about issues about deepening democracy and then the issues about also making our electoral system to function, to work. And the question for me here, is it the democracy that comes first to deepen the electoral system, or do we need the electoral system to deepen our democratic system? Because everything boils down to system. So which one pushes the other? I would think that we need to put a lot of energy in deepening democracy first. And that democracy, we deepen it in such a way that it forces an electoral system to function. Very specifically, for instance, the electoral, we need, I don't understand what kind of electoral body or board we have. I'm not sure we do have one. We need an electoral board, for instance, that is primarily responsible, for nominating or selecting the chairperson of INEC and other commissioners of INEC, not the executive. So if you have an electoral board whose constitution is also, broad and representative of the Nigerian, not the Nigerian geographical character, but the Nigerian, various groups. For instance, you want to see a judiciary, as a member of this electoral board. You want to see a varied, segment of the civil society,
so a
multi-stakeholder electoral board, and that should be it should be the responsibility of that board to, first of all, at least primarily nominate or select and only recommend what you have selected to the presidency to assent to, not the presidency or the executive having that primary responsibility. And then secondly, in addition to that, even the judiciary. Now we are beginning to see some judges, some whatever, into certain courts, and then they are already preparing and positioning, judges to courts in preparation for 2027. Again, I think that there is also, in terms of democracy, we need a process of a judicial board that also does that. And only say, just like you have in the VC, the election of the VCs, by the law of education law in the academia, it is not the president that just wakes up, to elect or to nominate a vice chancellor. The process of electing a vice chancellor comes from the senate of the school itself, and ASU also has a hand in it. So I think that kind of process, we need to be canvassing for that. Because, when we talk about a system, and I quite agree with the comrade here that said, even the system, it is the people that run the system. So it is not sufficient for us to say that we need system above people. And that it's very important that we are mindful of the kind of people that are in positions of affecting how systems evolve and how systems also function. So this, very broad multi-stakeholder participation in the process of election, the whole process of this institution, of the electoral institution process, is very important. And apart from that, again, aside from that, even the process of the emergence of candidates, it's something that also has to be democratically, resolved in such a way that it is not it is not just opened for money bags. And so the process through which people emerge as candidates, even in their own political parties, there has to be a guiding principle that makes it so open that even if you are a billionaire, your money is not going to matter in that process, because you will not need that money in that process for you to emerge. It is the people that decide, and the people will decide on the basis of, there will also be rules, on the basis of how important, what are those things, that how present are you in that community. Not how present are you in terms of your name or who is your father, but how physically, how technically, how traditionally How effective, how much of people's lives are you into in those communities? That should be the major factor of your emergence. These days you see somebody who probably has not even been a part of a community for years, and suddenly this person comes around. You are completely disconnected from that community. You don't have a presence there. You don't understand what they feel and how they feel it. And then you emerge as a candidate. You are emerging as a candidate because of power. And for me, if we follow the process of deepening democracy in the context of allowing the deepening of democracy to also factor into the process of deepening our electoral system, then we see how people, take control of the whole process, and which is for me very, very important, very, very key. And finally, to say that, so that process through which people also emerge, I think for me the final thing, is around the judiciary. Can we, I don't know how much it is in the electoral rules or regulations, about there has to be a limit. There has to be a no-go area for the courts to take a decision on the outcome of an election. Because gradually we are beginning to see a situation where it is the courts that decide the election, not the people that decide the election. And this has to stop. Votes are counted. There are issues of error or processes of votes not properly counted. There is a limit. There is how we must ensure that the judiciary takes a decision, intervenes or does not intervene. At some point, at best, rather than the judiciary even pronouncing a winner, the judiciary at best can say that, look, certain procedures are flawed on the basis of this information, this evidence, go back, take it back to INEC and say, look, do something about reviewing these errors that the judiciary has discovered, but not for the judiciary to make a pronouncement on who, wins an election. Let me stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And
Mention your name.
Ayokunle Fagbemi is the name. It is clear that all of us are now agreed on one major issue, that what we are dealing with is that we are dealing with state capture in Nigeria. Within the context of state capture that we are dealing with, the operators and actors are actually now consolidating and reinforcing themselves as kakistocrats. And that is why it is easy for us to be having appointments coming up the way they are coming into the electoral management body. And you will discover that political actors themselves become complicit, and the political parties fail in complying with the legal provisions and often go to use the law courts to validate their illegality. A classical example occurred in the 2023 presidential election, wherein a particular political actor became a member and a candidate of a particular political party in less than 4 weeks and participated in the primary and became the candidate. But incidentally, the clause, because when you take a look at the Electoral Act, it says that you needed to fulfill some conditionalities based on the provisions of the 1999 Constitution. This particular candidate entered into that party, and the party constitution says that you must have been a bona fide member of that party in good standing, and you must have paid consecutively as and at when due your membership dues for minimum of 6 months. For someone who was in another party but ended up becoming the presidential candidate of another in less than 1 month, he couldn't have been paying 6 months as and at when due. However, all of us allowed it to be, meaning that in as much as we want to discuss the electoral management body and the judiciary, we need again to focus a lot more on the political parties and their capacity, willingness to comply with the rules, regulations, and follow the processes accordingly. We've talked about the votes counting. You will agree with me, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, that we are expected to have party agents at the polling units. If you add party agents at the polling units, whether you are using the electronic format or you are using the Form EC8A, and I'm not a lawyer, and I always want to play the devil's advocate when I get to this particular point. We are quick when it comes to election matters which we claim is sui generis, and get excited to be interested in uploading, making reference to beavers, excited about electronic evidence. Meanwhile, the Evidence Act, I am not too sure, has fully embraced receiving all these kind of materials. I stand, okay, if it has. Now, how many of the actors in the chain, value chain, truly understand all the nitty-gritty of how to utilize all these electronic evidences and how they are supposed to validate, mindful of the fact that it is easy to breach? But that is not even where I am excited in going to. We've talked directly about the poor confidence level. But the most important thing is that it looks as if our elites and the political class are not interested in informed elite self-preservation, and they are not excited about the stability of the Nigerian state beyond their own state capture interest. If that is the case, then we will need to ensure that we begin to ask questions about the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that are in place for the electoral management body during the elections. My very good friend, Professor Maurice Iwu, introduced something at a stage, and that was a joint civil society multi-stakeholder monitoring and evaluation system, which allowed real-time interventions to take place. I heard you the other time, you were saying you, in '99, you led a group of monitors, and I beg to disagree, you led a group of observers. I said observers are monitors. Observers. Now, for someone like me, that I was privileged to have been in government, and I had participated at the monitoring level and from the civil society at the observation level, I will tell you some few things that I've discovered. Because the political parties and candidates do not rely on strategists, and you've given me a good example to use. You provided a legal counsel which was based on your field experience as someone that has been active, and you fall suo moto into a strategist mode, but it did not listen to you. Until our political parties and candidates rely, like the recently conducted elections in the United States, rely heavily on strategists. And I'll give you what they've done, both parties, Democrats and Republicans. They already had on each side of the divide over 5,000 lawyers that were ready nationwide in the entire United States, and to each lawyer they had over 10
depending on the jurisdiction, over 10 strategies attached to them. And they were following all these things. I'm already in receipt, because I belong to a network, of some depositions that they even have already acquired of some people that participated in electoral malfeasance in the United States, this last election, presidential election. I am going to now say enough of our emphasizing or focusing on the electoral management body, INEC, and the judiciary. I think it is time for us to begin to zero in on the political parties. As we are going into Ondo, you will discover that in Edo and the 2023 election, something happened. After the election day is over, people want to start pursuing the electoral management body for documentation. Ideally, the party agents are the ones that should have procured that documentation. I will want to plead for those of you who handle cases to enlighten our friends who are political actors, candidates, and the party to understand that there is one phrase that ends up being used in the law courts during litigation phase, and that is that we do not receive evidence from third party unless it is translated into a legal format. It therefore means that going forward, political parties must be strengthened to have party agents that are going to do the due diligence and are going to be willing immediately the election is over at the polling unit level to truthfully and genuinely collect the EC8A and depose to an affidavit immediately that will be collected by some team serving the political candidates and the party at that level. And this is the only way when we get to the collation level, which you, Austin, you were trying to allude to earlier on. Until the political parties are really ready and strengthened to do the correct things, we will still be around this table. I'm minding my time, but because we need to shift attention away. The political parties, it should interest you to note, for example, Labour Party for 2023 presidential election, which happened again in Edo for the Labour Party, for the PDP, for the APC as well. It is just the fact that they won that they are able to overcome this. You end up having a situation where political parties deploy individuals who are not completely loyal to that political party. And if you deploy somebody that is not completely loyal to the political party to serve as a party agent, it can compromise at that level. And I'm looking forward to the day that we will be able to really address this subject matter clearly. If Labour Party for presidential election or PDP in Edo or Labour Party in Edo uploaded the names of some individuals and it was discovered that those individuals did not eventually materialize at the polling units, it means that the political parties are the problems. So they do not have from EC8A duplicates or triplicates that they can use to even pursue any litigation meaningfully. Again, there's one other entity that collects copies that ideally ought to always be subpoenaed during the litigation phase if we are really interested.
The police.
Thank you very much.
I forget that. Yes.
Sir, excuse me, it's good to focus on the electoral management body, but if you now want us to really improve and ensure that things are done correctly, we need to begin to put some of these bodies on the spot. Political parties the security law enforcement agencies that police elections that are at this level superintended by the police, because they give to the SSS, they give to the police. And you'll discover that in Edo they are claiming that it looks as if some fresh EC8 ABC suddenly surfaced. Now, it is time for us to begin to see how we can use all this to interrogate the process, and I want to thank you. I'm hoping that we will be able to do a lot more ultimately. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Before I have some problems, using Edo now, it's okay. What happened in Edo? How can we avoid it? What lessons flow from it? So, but I like the conversation, the issue you mentioned about orientation. I think Father will say also about something about that. I'm a vice chairman of the Institute of Ethics and Professionalism, and we are working together with them, Abuja School, to help shape, maybe mainstream some ethical training, in the hope that if we can't take over power, those who are in power maybe can be taught to learn better. The Plato's crisis of saying philosophers become king. But if philosophers cannot be king, maybe we can make philosophers out of kings. So it didn't work in Athens. I don't know whether it will work here. But the idea is, if we can't take power, if we can't, how you're talking about getting people who would deliver at the local level. If those people can't win, is it possible that those who have already captured power can be, it's like tying the giant, use process, procedure to tie their hands, so that they cannot do much evil, and maybe change their thinking to do some good. So I am idealist, realist. We are going to be dealing with a world where we can think about options, but we can't have all the solutions. And again, it's not our job. We shouldn't think that to get a solution, we must solve everything, micromanage to make sure that only people who are good are elected. No. If we take a system that is fair and strong enough, yes, that system may create a bad leader. Just to be clear. So nothing says that if a electoral system is free and fair, only the wise one will win. Yes. The foolish man can win. Yes. So I won't be bothered to solve all the problems to show that the man who is councillor, governor, president is a wise, honest man. That's not the kind of thing I will kill myself for.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for that. My name is Paul.
Party for like 2 years. We have provided support, youth support. But at the end of the day, it ended up nothing. Political parties has a clause in their constitution that talked about waiver. Yeah. If you come today, they will put you in. Yeah. So there are political party in all essence, with all due respect, is the weakest link. The weakest. But meanwhile, elsewhere, the US, the UK, and all of the political parties, the strongest. So what method can we use? See, my brother, if you focus on strengthening citizens, which is good, the faith of citizens has been lost. Even you in this room, many of us in this room. Truly, how many of us voted in 2023 election? It starts from this room, maybe 2 or 3 or 4. No, I'm just saying maybe 2 or 3 or 4. I'm not saying. We can. If you want us to take statistics, we'll take in this room. Of course, I didn't vote because my poll worked. But what I'm saying is, essence is this: there's a trust deficit. System has failed the people. And until you re-echo that systemic decay to upscale the zeal of the people, if you criminalize vote, people will come and vote and tear the ballot paper and put it inside the ballot paper, ballot box, and waste it because of the anger. I speak like this because I am passionate of a Nigerian state, because I've seen elsewhere. And to end it, with all due respect, back to the political party poll agent, we can take lead from Ghana. Ghana has minimum 78% of turnout of voters. System trust. People will turn out to vote if they know that the system will produce the outcome. Otherwise, people won't turn out. Thank you.
Okay, let me make this point before I round up. We shouldn't lose faith in solving problems. But problems are not solved.
Hold on, please. We're wrapping up.
We shouldn't lose faith in solving problems. But problems are not solved without proper, rigorous understanding of the problems. We have two problems in this country. One is that we first assume we know the problem, and therefore we say, let's solve the problem. We don't spend time to, even if you know, the reason for conversation is you know more. You hear other versions of the problem. This series is designed to focus on issues. Next one, we're going to have to send ahead the concept paper so that our conversations will be centered. We are saying that as part of our discussion around electoral management body, we are worried about INEC's role flowing from what they have done in Edo. So the question we're asking ourselves is, what can we do to guarantee a more fair, efficient electoral management? We have said that you cannot have INEC appointed by the president executive and expect that they're going to be that independent. Now we are seeing an emerging trend where INEC is now, new INEC will be probably made up of directors, ex-directors, civil servants who have worked in INEC. And that poses more danger. We've seen the two nominations. We are hearing the story that one of the former REC at Lagos and Edo is going to be the chairman. Now, what we are seeing is a complete takeover of the electoral management body in a way that you can't even guarantee any procedure. That's number one. Number two is that we are saying that, like somebody said here, that we should pay more attention to the procedure of electoral management. Make it more participatory, clear, nothing is left for chance. And the ultimate is that results will be declared of the polling unit, transferred electronically, and we know, and we should use collection as a procedure to subvert real results that are harvested at the polling unit. Now, Edo election tells us, now we have seen that the Edo result was declared with result different from IREF. IREF had about 8,000 difference. The result declared was about 42,000 difference. Now, it means that at the minimum, there was no clear winner with all the overvoting, all the results that should have been cancelled. Two, even now, the results from the IREF and the certified true copies are different results. So the question then is, if results are declared and uploaded, and then the certified true copy request is different, how should we ensure that this new slippery slope of incredible results, look at where we're coming from. 2019, you mentioned it, issue was server. 2033, issue was IREF was shut down. Nobody has told us why it was shut. In 2024 with Edo, we are still talking about results being different, posted different results, declared different results, and now tendering different results. So the view of the Abuja school is that the courts now, INEC has done their job in Edo, we are now before the court. How should the judiciary manage this? And it's very clear that the court should have, somebody mentioned the issue about activism, the court should have the courage to reject results that show clearly that they are manipulated. The court may not pronounce a winner. The court can remand those results to INEC to take consequential action. Look, I like the word somebody used here. He talked about judicial deterrence. The reason why politicians are now more heroic in manipulating the electoral system, it happened in Edo, it happened in 2027, is that there's no deterrence for electoral offenses and manipulation. If the courts, imagine if the court had nullified 2023 election, for example, without the money politicians have spent, everybody will be careful to rig again. This is my theory. If the courts cancel elections where politicians have spent billions to rig, they will be less inclined to bribe either INEC or police for electoral results, knowing that ultimately those results can be cancelled. So I want to see the court exercise more capacity to second guess this INEC's manipulated election. If Edo says true, as Kogi said true, as Simo said true, 2027, you can't guarantee participation. You're talking about low voter turnout. Why will voters go? Look at the number who voted in Edo. About 20% of elected voters. Now, it will go to 10% in the future, because the moral climate now is that nothing can be done.
Yes.
They capture INEC, they capture the police. Like I said in the first place, I said the strategy to rig election to win is capture INEC, capture judiciary, capture the security. Now, if this capture is complete, because the courts are not cancelling bad results, there will be nobody who will go and vote. So the Abuja school says, like you said, deepening democracy or even consulting democracy in Nigeria will require some institutional revision that allow for some faith. They will start doing the work of deepening democracy. They will start mobilizing citizens. They will start building political parties. If there's total impunity, it was incentive for parties to care about internal democracy. When they should be thinking about buying the process, where is the incentive for you to go and educate voters when you know that ultimately outcome depends on who will buy INEC and buy judiciary? We have to break that immunity structure to begin to revise democracy and build support. So the Abuja school will not relent. We're still having this conversation. Yes. We agreed the last time to have a small group to look at the National Action Plan. We want to provide a plan that says this is what should be done, this is how it can be done. Yes. We look at the procedure of electoral reform, say this is the one for judiciary, these are steps you can take, this is the one for political parties, these are steps you can take, this is the one for civil society, so that somehow we will escape this prophecy of doom in 2027. So I want to thank everybody for